to state finance, about the threat to the transparency, and I invite here Oleh Medunytsya, who is an MP from Народный Front, and also Viktor Taran and Viktor Mazyarchuk, who are experts of the Reanimation package of reforms. Good morning, dear colleagues. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming here. We'd like to talk about the situation as far as the fight against corruption in the sphere of public finance is concerned. On the one hand, we have good news because the parliament has adopted a law on the openness of the use of public finance. On the other hand, the president is now dragging with signing this law. This law is revolutionary, and it provides for the creation of a single web portal on which the citizens can see online how the enterprises and ministries and all the state bodies are using state money, budget money, how they report for it, and you will be able to see online the entire accountants of the Treasury. We are very much grateful to the MPs for what they for the fact that they voted in favor of this law, but the president has not signed it for 10 days now. So I would like Oleh Medunytsya, a co-author of the law, to talk about the law. Well, really, the law is important, and when I was speaking at the parliament, enticing my colleagues to vote for this law, I told them, when you will talk to journalists and public activists and to your voters, and they will be asking you, what reforms are you conducting? This law provides us with the reform of the sphere of public finances. This is very logical, and it goes along with other laws, for instance, the changes to the law of public purchases, procurement, and according to this law, the sphere of the state and communal enterprises is going to become even more transparent. We are making the finance of National Bank and the funds of social insurance, make them transparent. And this means more mechanisms of control for journalists, for public activists, to local councillors, and I am very much surprised that the administration of the president has not signed it yet. If I remember correctly, almost all the MPs who were in the session hall at the moment, they voted for. There was no one who even abstained, and we should implement this norm by way of having president sign it. Thank you, Mr. Medunytsya. Thank you for all your help during the adoption of the law, and this was one of the first laws announced by the Reanimation package of reforms. And now the floor goes to Viktor Mazyarchuk. First of all, we should say that the adoption of this law is provided for by the strategy of the stable development of Ukraine 2020. This is one of the demands of the European Union as far as the openness of information of on public finance is concerned. If we take accounts, reports of the auditing commission, we see that 30-35% is not used is not open, and this law opens all the information about the expenditure of state bodies according to what is bought, at what price it is bought, so that any journalist or expert or any citizen can go to a specially created site and have a look whether this ministry that they are interested in, or an agency or state enterprise, what they are buying and what is the level of purchases. This will allow to decrease the level of corruption by 30% because officials will be afraid that activists will be asking too many questions. Also, the adoption of this law, and Ukraine is probably one of the few countries where there was no clause on the openness of this information. At the moment, we have a great question why they are disrupting this signing of these documents, because even the term stipulated by the legislation has ended.
We also have information that many of local authorities and state companies informally are trying to communicate with the presidential administration with request to veto the law because of the big level of corruption is taking place when there are schemes applied with public money, and we request the journalists to make this information public, to also exercise pressure on the presidential administration so that the law is signed as soon as possible, because the corruption in public finance kills our country. We need reform in this sphere. I would like to add a couple of more words, that this law is not just the one that can paralyze the work of some communal companies or local authorities, because this law does not become effective immediately. There will be enough time for everyone to get ready for the law to become effective, so that there are no problems which we saw when the law on access to public information was passed, because the law was passed in December, became effective in May, and only in the end of summer it realistically started operating. Now this law should work for the benefit of our society. Now your questions? Do you have any questions? I have a question. Let us start from saying that when there are opponents to the initiative, they give counter-arguments. When not now, if you can very briefly simply explain what are the three key ideas of your opponents as to making this law effective. The arguments are where to get money from to create this single web portal. According to the assessments made by international experts, this is 300,000–400,000 euros. Why? Because the similar portal is in Poland and it's working. So we negotiated with the European Commission, with the World Bank, and they say that as part of the assistance that Ukraine gets, which is $100 million, they can find this money. The government can use this money for that. That is what is offered by the law. These are difficult procedures, information on the local budget, the information on every contract in online regime, but this time for about half a year, when this all could be done and all the civil servants are to be taught how to do that. There's one more detail. During the debates in the Verkhovna Rada, there was not a single MP who would publicly mention some counter arguments against the law. Publicly, no one said anything and that the law cannot be passed because of this or that reason. There was some fighting in the lobby, and we can say that the law was approved in consensus, even from presidential administration. No one can say why the law cannot be signed. 289 MPs voted for that. It's almost constitutional majority.
Телеканал ТВ.
Does the openness of finance and the pertain to the statistics of the National Bank, including refinancing and interventions that they conduct? And if this is so, will it help to contain the fall of hryvnia? This law does relate to the National Bank of Ukraine, and the National Bank of Ukraine tried behind the scenes to influence the adoption of the law and even preclude the adoption of the law. And it does provide for accountability of the National Bank everywhere where state finance is concerned. For instance, we're now hearing that they have printed 90 to 270 billion hryvnia, but we still don't know this, and it is very important to prepare a respective legislative basis. Almost 2 years have passed since the law on the openness came into force, because the Cabinet of Ministers headed by Azarov was actually sabotaging the introduction into force. I have another question on this topic, not about the National Bank, but about the practice that is in our country, where we have very good laws, but some technical moments allow to sabotage these laws. Have you calculated how many regulatory norms should be adopted in order to enact this law, in order to make it working? And if you, as far as I understand, do not exclude the possibility of sabotaging this law, then what the measures could be used in order to avert this? First, there should be a resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers that should provide for a body of state authority that will be responsible for the realization of this law. We think that this should be the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Economy, and the State Treasury. More than that, we will follow this issue and monitor it so that it happens just so. Then there should be changes in the typical procedures of the work of local bodies of power and local self-government that would stipulate that a responsible person or a new structure should be responsible for preparing the documents on the use of this money. Also, the third document, we suggested that there should be a blank for a form for accountability, but of course the MPs said no, you should use the existing ones. And the major thing is the issue of the creation of the web portal and its structure, and where is the danger in this? There's so much information that if the site is not structured rightly, then we won't be able to find anything there. The same happened to the Register of State Procurement. But I remind you that there is a Polish analog where you can actually replicate what they have done. And we will have to adopt another very important act, how to implement this site into the system of information policy of Ukraine, because there are certain peculiarities. And we're now talking to IT people on this. This is the central level. And then all the bodies of local power should pass similar acts to fulfill the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers. This is just a framework, and of course there will be changes in the process of work, but this is the basis of what has to be done. Another important issue for everyone to understand, this information is owned, the Ministry of Finance does have this information. You should just transfer it from a closed space to open access. And this information is also in this treasury, but they do not share it. So this is the key issue, the access and the counteraction to corruption. Same as far as state procurement is concerned. The information is there, it is not being published. And we plan to reveal purchases starting from 1,000 hryvnia. And this is there in the transitionary clauses, and we are grateful to MPs that they have supported this, endorsed this. Thank you very, very much. Let's hope there won't be disruption in the enactment of this law. Thank you.